Welcome to the Toronto Debating Society. Today is January 10th, 2017. This is a regular parliamentary debate. Our resolution is, be it resolved, the American dream is overrated. Prime Minister for this evening is Michael, who will speak to us for 7 minutes now.
Could the timer not start yet? I just have to put my research up here. That's my research material. No, that's actually to bring it up so my eyes aren't good. So, ladies and gentlemen, oh sorry, I have to start my timer here. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we're going to approach this debate from 3 different points of view. We're going to talk about economic prosperity, we're going to talk about social and family aspects, and we're going to talk about safety and peacefulness as our definition. My partner will deal with African Americans and women to explain how they have also been left out of the American dream. The American dream that has existed in the U.S. for over 50 years is on life support. For many, it is already dead. Many Americans no longer believe that they will ever be financially secure. The belief that you can succeed financially with hard work has been a core tenet of the American dream. This foundational element of the U.S. dream is now out of reach for most Americans, especially the young. Since the Great Depression, the American dream has been linked to home ownership. But now America is becoming a renter nation. While the cost of buying basic staples have largely remained the same over the last 30 years in real terms, housing prices have soared, and home ownership rates are going in the opposite direction. The number of renter households has gone way up and are now the majority in 9 of the U.S. largest cities. Renting is no longer limited to recent graduates, as the majority of renters are now over 40 years old. Even Americans employed full-time are now struggling to even find rental housing. One of the primary reasons families can't find affordable housing is because the costs of housing have risen much quicker than household income, and this results in downward economic mobility. The fact that for all but the very rich, wages have been stagnant in real terms for almost 30 years. All but the best paid workers routinely have multiple and long periods of unemployment now. Likewise, workers are now more likely to be underemployed and hold jobs that require less education than they in fact have. Stagnant wages and unsteady jobs have created income inequality gaps that are now at levels the U.S. has not seen in almost a century. Because the richest Americans receive a disproportionate share of the income, the dream of upward mobility has all but vanished. Because wages have not kept pace with soaring housing prices, Americans must make trade-offs. For example, 1/5 of Americans now have to supplement their income just to pay their basic bills with part-time work. Many are using their credit cards to pay for their basic necessities, putting them further in debt. The situation is bleak. Most young adults in the U.S. feel that financial security in their sunset years is almost hopeless. Almost 50% of adults who are nearing retirement have no retirement savings or pension. Americans who have worked hard and played by the rules have lost faith in the American dream. They are disillusioned and politically are showing signs of despair, as displayed in the recent U.S. election. Voters who have lost faith in the American dream embraced Donald Trump. The disenchanted supported his extreme views because they no longer believe that traditional political candidates will help their desperate cause. People who believe the American dream is still alive would never have elected Donald Trump. Doing so was an act of desperation. Downward mobility is now the new normal for most Americans. Upward mobility is now an insurmountable dream. On CNN, and I've even noted the time, if you ever wanted to check, at 6:15 on December the 10th, there was a report that I noted down in preparation for this debate. Listen to this. In 1950, the percentage of children earning more than their parents at age 30 was 91%. That figure now is less than 50%. If that doesn't say it all, I'd like to know what does. And if you look at the U.S. electoral map, as this report showed, those states where that was in fact true, those were the states that turned to vote Donald Trump in. That says it all right there. Let's now look at the Social issues, specifically the term families, which is part of our definition. Family life, a vital part of the American dream, is deteriorating just as quickly as the economy. Half of U.S. marriages now end in divorce. 1 in 4 children in the States are being raised without a father. Over 30% of Americans live alone, not in a family situation, and that is 100 million people. 5 million in the States live in inadequate public housing. Over 50 million Americans live in poverty. 15% of Americans go to bed hungry. Over 35 million Americans, that is the entire population of Canada, do not have any health care coverage. And it'll only get worse under Donald Trump. Deteriorating family life contributes in a big way to the death of the American dream. Our definition also referred to peacefulness as part of the American dream, which is really what we're talking about is safety. But the U.S. now is a dangerous place to live. It's not very peaceful at all. For proof, 14,000 people were murdered in the USA last year alone. That's 50 people murdered a day, or 2 per hour. 2 people were killed in the States since you left home tonight. There were 1.5 million violent crimes in the U.S. There were 1.5 million violent crimes in the good old USA last year. That's 3,200 a day, 150 per hour, 2 per minute. A violent crime just happened. There were 375 people killed in mass shootings in the USA last year. That's about 1 per day. Several were killed last week in the Fort Lauderdale airport, where I will be in 3 weeks. This could be my last debate. The U.S. murder rate is off the charts. For example, Chicago and Toronto have about the same populations. Last year, 70 people were killed in Toronto, 700 in Chicago, same population. That's 10 times the murder rate in a U.S. city. The number of people in USA prisons has gone up more than 4 times in the last 4 decades. There are over 2.5 million Americans, adults, that's just adults, in U.S. prisons. That's the entire population of Toronto, and they're all in jail in the USA. The USA represents less than 3% of the world's population. They have 25% of the world's prisoners. So much for the land of the free. Ladies and gentlemen, for economic, family, and safety reasons, let there be no doubt that the American dream is dead. All of the great societies in history self-destructed from within. And the Greeks did it, the Romans did it, all of history will show that. And the U.S. is in the process of self-destructing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next, there will be leader of the opposition. He will also speak to us for 7 minutes. Please welcome Dean.
Mr. Speaker, government members, opposition, and ladies and gentlemen. The American dream is overrated, says the government. Well, let us understand what the government is telling you. Here we have no economic prosperity, no social and family welfare, and no safety. The United States is a cesspool of don't go there. It's not worth it. Well, I want to tell you, ladies and gentlemen, in fact, it is not that bad. And the American dream is still alive and well in the United States. Firstly, the American dream is the opportunity for prosperity and success, upward mobility, and having the people living in peace and living in this prosperity. And in fact, that does still happen. Now, the government says nobody's financially secure, home ownership is unattainable, house costs are up, stagnant wages, part-time work. Donald Trump is a reflection of what's happening. And in fact, he says the 1950s, 91% of kids were earning more than their parents. I will remind you, in 1950, World War II just ended. And there was a huge boom of the economy at that time. Houses were being built by the thousands in the suburbs, which never existed before. So there was a huge economic boom. People were working like crazy. Technology had changed, so people had those jobs. Technology is still changing, and people are still getting jobs in the computer industry, IT, and the like. But the issue, too, is what do people expect? When the immigrants came in the 1910s and 1920s, they had nothing. They had a suitcase. The government would have you believe that they were coming in their Mercedes-Benzes, and oh my goodness, well, isn't it? No, they struggled just as much as the people are now. They weren't millionaires. They were not millionaires after 50 years of struggling. But after 50 years of struggling, their children managed to make a successful go of it. Got an education, got a better job. That's the problem, is the expectations are so high now that we should all be millionaires. Well, we can't all be millionaires, and we shouldn't all be millionaires. The average US wage right now per person per annum, according to the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, is about $58,000, $59,000. And if you use current interest rates in the States, you can buy yourself a $200,000 house in over 30 years doing that. And no, you don't eat steak every night, but you get a house out of it. And that's what it's about, is you can't be a millionaire all the time. And it's not good to be a millionaire. Therefore, the American dream is not you will become a millionaire. It is you will be prosperous. That could be prosperous. That's prosperous. But it's relative. So it's not overrated. It's how you perceive it. The second thing, instant gratification, is the scourge of the present age. Thomas Edison said success is 1% inspiration and 99% perspiration. Today, nobody wants the perspiration. They want 100% inspiration and cash. They want the live now, pay later lifestyle. And when they're not on lifestyles of the rich and famous, they say, what's wrong with me? It's not what's wrong with you, it's what's wrong with that TV program. Why are they telling you you should own a yacht? And you're nothing if you don't. The immigrants knew they had to work hard. They worked hard. Miners, and working in warehouses and shipyards, making a small wage, feeding their families, of lots of kids. There aren't lots of kids nowadays. The average US family has 1.3 kids. There's no problem feeding 1.3 kids, even on a lower wage, than there was feeding 9 kids in the 1910s. They persevered, and as I said, their effort shows because their kids were able to do better than they did. They went to school, they got educated, they got better jobs, so that in the 1950s they were making more than their parents were. That's the American dream. Thirdly, the American dream connects you to the larger community. It's not just you with your little white picket fence, like the It's a Wonderful Life thing. Everybody has a house, 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 house. That's not the dream. The dream is you're self-sufficient, you have a place to live with a roof over your head, food to feed your kids, and it's not a 10-foot wall between you and your neighbor. And that's what the government doesn't say, is that people in communities do help each other. And all these people who don't have jobs in that, not only are there government agencies that help them, but their neighbors help them. That doesn't get reported in the news because that's not sexy. Murder rates and rapes and other things that happen, that's sexy for the news. But there are communities that are working to build the social fabric that don't get reported on. I'm certain that South Africa had a higher murder rate than many of the cities in the US. Suddenly now, South Africa, or at least when Nelson Mandela was in charge, was a pretty okay place to live, relatively speaking, compared to 50 years before that. So if you ask them, well, how's your dream going? Well, it's certainly better than it was 50 years ago. That's prosperity. No, it doesn't have to be here. That's the problem. Everybody sets the ceiling so high and says, poor me, instead of going, well, that's okay. I'm alive. I'm eating. I have a roof over my head. And the people who don't own a house, they do rent, and there are places to rent. They share with each other. They're in smaller communities. That's also prosperity. That's also part of the American dream, working together to realize your potential. So, the government has fear to offer you. We have a much better dream.
Thank you. Now the Secretary for the Government will have an opportunity to speak for 5 minutes. Please welcome Anita.
Thank you, ladies and gentlemen. Well, the opposition has come up with a list of things with actually no facts to back them up, no examples. And one thing I would like to make clear before we start off here, our premise from the beginning has been that the American dream of those same immigrants who came over after the war and were looking for just a life that was better from despots and war and poverty in other countries, and expected a better life in America. And actually, back then, there was a chance to have that. Our whole premise is that dream, not the dream of unrealistic expectations of wealth, that is what the government is arguing tonight. That the dream, no different than the immigrants of the 1950s, is not attainable today. I mean, he's saying, oh, technology changes, there will always be jobs in technology. No, I will talk to you about what's happening in education and what's happening to the jobs, the better paying jobs, including technology. It's a real threat to the American dream. So I'd like to go into my thoughts on this. The ideal of a better life, the progress is inevitable, and we obey the rules and work hard, that material prosperity is assured. I think it has been replaced by a bitter truth. It is a lie. My partner has talked to you about 3 tenets of the American dream. The overall economic growth and prosperity for a better life, affordable housing, and living in a safe and peaceful environment. I'm going to back up some of my partner's economic points, and I will talk a little bit about education as well and equal opportunity. As Michael has stated, upward mobility is unattainable for over 50% of Americans, and he has provided examples of economic struggles. I am going to tell you that outsourcing is a big part of the economic struggles that are facing Americans today. Companies are making soaring profits. So there is lots of money being made in the US, but it is going to the rich. The poor, it is not filtering down to the poor because so many jobs have been outsourced. When this started, the idea was to outsource low-skill jobs, but now very high-paying jobs are being outsourced. And people who are working in these industries, there's nowhere else for them to go. These jobs don't come back. And trust me, it is not in Trump's interest to bring them back. And then corporate profit is everything. Companies, even when you do have a job, companies are cutting back on company pensions. So people are just basically eking out a living day to day. Michael has talked about the exorbitant cost of living, cost of housing. It isn't about a big house in the suburbs. It's about even affordable rentals if you do have a job. Medical costs are going up. Companies are cutting back on benefits. So many people in the United States do not have coverage or do not have adequate coverage. These are basic dreams, basic points of the American dream. Now, to talk about education. Education has always been viewed as the facilitator of the American dream. In today's world, a college education or an advanced certificate represents the entry ticket to a rewarding career and fulfilling lives where you can provide for your family. 3/4 of the fastest growing occupations, including technology, require education beyond a high school diploma. Science, technology, engineering. But today, the United States has one of the highest dropout rates in the world. It ranks 12th in countries where college is even attainable because of the costs. People who do complete college often do not graduate, do complete high school often don't graduate. Even though the US spends more per capita on students, they still have very poor passing grades. US model for schools is based on graduation. So your funding for your school is based on how many kids graduate. Black schools, black kids are graduating at a much lower rate. 69% compared to 86% for white schools. White schools, therefore, are getting the funding. What happens? You end up with people who are not properly educated, not going into the work system, and crime. So, also, women. Women are making less money than white men in the United States. And black women are making even less than white women. So, if you consider that women and black women and black people are not making money, how can you say that the American dream is alive and well? George Carlin joked that the American dream, it's called the American dream because you have to be asleep to believe it. Thank you.
Thank you. And finally, the seconder for the opposition will conclude the first part of the debate. She will also speak to us for 5 minutes. Please welcome Danielle.
The government would have you believe that the American is overrated, and they decided to choose a point in time. However, some of their points don't make any sense. And I will start with the point around women and black African American women not having the same salary as their counterpart, their white counterpart. There are many reasons for that to happen. But the thing is, it was not any better when the American dream was all alive and well, as far as they were saying. Also, they said that education is the key point around that education. The people are not getting the education that they need. Now, they never talked about famous dropouts that actually did not follow a traditional path, that made their own path. I would like to argue on 3 points. One is that opportunities now are better than ever. Second one is that to realize the American dream, nothing has changed in the sense that you need patience and perseverance, imagination, vision to get it. And therefore, you need to find a different way than anybody else. And the third one is that the American dream is truly realistic. It's just a question of perspective. So my first point, opportunities still exist. And in fact, now